was driving with a friend of mine, and we were just driving down the road. I don't know where we were headed, but hopped in my car and we took off and was listening to the radio, and I heard this bleep where this guy came in, and he said, it has not been said whose body it is or something like that, but we know that it is a male, and it is, it was found dead or whatever in whatever, building or house. And then it just kind of cut off to like a commercial, but it was definitely one of those things where I turned on and jumped into oh, this is obviously some kind of a news brief going on. It wasn't just like standard news in the news today.
I had somewhat of a unique story in that I was one of the very first people to find out. The electrician who discovered Kurt's body called a local radio station called KXRX. And I had been a contributor to KXRX. I would go on there and do local music news. So before they even went on the air with the announcement, they called me at my office at the Rocket and said, "There's a body at Kurt Cobain's house. Could it be Kurt?"
And it was really odd because without really knowing and waiting through a commercial break, somehow I was thinking, that's probably Kurt. I don't know why. I don't know what made me think that. I just felt it. It's like, that's probably Kurt.
It was about a half an hour later that news broke and went public. And I just remember sitting in my office and thinking that this just can't be true. He had a number of suicides in his family. He himself thought that suicide was genetic. The things that happened to him with fame, what happened with Courtney Love, all those things are so secondary, I think, ultimately to the man's genetic makeup and genetic predisposition to depression, which I think really is the lens we have to look at his death under.
I think the thing to me was, and I've always felt that, I think it was just kind of like, almost like being robbed, There was just certain things that I kind of wanted to say, things that I would have liked to have, talked with him about, not necessarily anything specific, just that we hadn't talked in a while, and I realized that was gone. That was the hardest part for me. It was just gone. The opportunity wasn't even going to happen anymore. So,
the tragic ending to a life that had been as quick as a flashing star on the horizon. Kurt wrote the song about living under the bridge and told that story, which I found out was mythical. He didn't really live under the bridge. But the true story was even sadder, that he was homeless for a time and he broke into houses that were being built and slept there. He would break into apartments or go into apartments and sleep in the hallways. These are just very sad stories, and there's one story in my book which I think is absolutely the single most heartbreaking story of his entire life, that he would go into the hospital that he had been born in, and he would sleep in the waiting room because he wanted a warm place to sleep. And he figured if he was in a hospital, nobody would come up and say, "Why are you here?" What a horrible, sad existence that his life had led to that point. The hospital was only about a half a mile away from where his mother lived, but he felt like he would rather be sleeping in a waiting room, in an emergency room, than he would his own house.
In Charles Cross's Cobain biography, he reveals that Kurt actually, in 1990, I think, applied for a job cleaning shit out of a dog kennel, and he didn't get the job. That shows how desperate, in a way, that he was, and the other members of Nirvana were no better. They were living in fairly, unprepossessing circumstances. That's, they regarded, for them, from a depressed working class background that they came from, rock and roll was a career option in a sense. It was an escape. It was their means to escape their circumstances.
He sent his tapes off to I think about 25 or so different record companies, including Alternative Tentacles and a lot of other ones, the one that Scratch Acid was on, and so forth. And he was pretty disappointed that he didn't get any response from most of them. I think he got 2 or 3 letters back saying that they weren't interested, and that really bummed him out a lot. But he put all the effort into writing the letters and sending the tapes off.
There was something that I just sort of felt, with being in the band and stuff, and it's like, I could just tell that there was there was something going on, that I knew that Kurt had something that was really unique and cool, that was gonna, come out eventually at some point. I think the big question was when. We didn't know that.
What I liked about Kurt, I guess, a lot was his personality. He could be very funny. He would tell jokes and play jokes and on people. He liked a lot of the same kind of music that I did. He liked a lot of this, doing the same sort of things, and he was very artistic too. He could draw really well. He played guitar, but that didn't matter to me so much at the time. I actually liked the fact that he could draw and stuff, and was funny more than that.
Well, Kurt Cobain's story is one of the most fascinating in rock because few people predict their career as accurately as he did. I mean, many kids will grow up and boast, I'm going to be a star when I grow up, and all of you will be sorry that you were so mean to me. Kurt Cobain is one of the few people who made those schoolyard taunts and ended up basically creating his own life story that way.
So we're good friends and playing music and doing what we did. But, you know, he was kind of a quiet person, but it was good, you know.
He was tremendously ambitious. At the same time, he acted like he wasn't ambitious. That was part of his sort of punk rock star persona. He acted as if fame was accidental, where every single step along the way he pursued fame tremendously. He drove a Volvo station wagon because he had read that it was the safest single car ever made, and he was an extremely safe driver, very cautious, didn't want to get in an accident. Yet at the same point, he drove that station wagon to a heroin dealer's house, bought drugs, recklessly overused those drugs, and overdosed many times.
At the end of the day, he had a very contradictory relationship with the rock lifestyle and with fame. And he thought he wanted it, and he knew that he didn't, and he could never make those two things gel or live alongside each other in any way.